Hello, everyone. I will wait a moment or two before we get started. Thank you for coming to our webinar today. People are logging on. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, The Importance of Electronics Recycling. My name is Allison Majerus, and I'm a program director at the Nebraska Recycling Council. The mission of the Nebraska Recycling Council is to maximize the economic and environmental benefits of resource recovery in Nebraska. I'm so glad you're joining us today to hear from Matt Weirman, the Business Development Manager at Sadoff E-Recycling and Data Destruction. We at NRC have worked with Matt for many years, and it'll be great to hear from him about electronics recycling. I would like to take this chance to thank the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy for their financial support of NRC this year. With their support, we are able to do programming like this webinar today. I want to let you know that we are recording this webinar and we'll post it on our website and on our YouTube channel after the webinar if you'd like to go back and refer to it. We hope this is a good discussion opportunity for you, so please, if you have a question, either type it into the question box or you can raise your hand and I can turn on your mic and you can ask Matt your question directly so everyone can hear. And Matt has said that he's open to taking questions throughout the webinar today. I'd like to share a bit of Matt's background before he gets started. Matt Weirman has dedicated over 2 decades of his life to the electronics recycling industry, driven by a deep passion for environmental sustainability. His journey began in 2002 when he founded Secure Recycling in Nebraska, a company committed to the responsible and secure disposal of electronic waste. Since then, he's been fortunate to join forces with Sadoff Iron and Metal in 2017, contributing to the company's growth and expansion in the electronics materials procurement sector, with a particular focus on large-scale producers, especially in telecommunications. His vision has always been rooted in sustainability, and throughout his career, he's strived to ensure that electronic materials are handled and recycled responsibly on a national scale. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt. Thank you again for coming, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Allison. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. As Allison mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in or comments. With a small group here, I think the opportunity to discuss things would be great if you have anything that comes up. And with that, we'll get started. So as Allison mentioned, today we're talking about the importance of recycling electronics for a sustainable future. First we got to talk about understanding what electronics waste is. E-waste refers to any unwanted end-of-life electronic device and can be produced by household, businesses, governments, industries, Fortunately, the problem is definitely growing at a huge rate, and we're doing, the globally 50 million tons of e-waste is generated each year, and by 2030, we're projected to be at 75 million tons. And e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream in America, according to the EPA, and currently only 12.5% of electronic waste is recycled globally. The growing concern of e-waste is huge in globally, but e-waste represents 2% of America's trash and landfills, but it equals 70% of the overall toxic waste. So just the numbers there shows how much toxic material is actually in the electronics materials, and with only 2% in the landfills, it's just a huge amount of the actual toxic waste being put into the ground. And each year, globally, we're doing 40 million tons of electronic waste, and again, back to only 12.5% of that is actually recycled. The next slide here is understanding the electronic waste and the economics of it, and how it actually works with the economy. And one of the big points here is over $60 million worth of silver and gold is literally thrown into the trash and landfills each year, just from cell phones. So it's if you're thinking about all the cell phones that just get thrown in the trash and how much precious metals are in those, and the resources it takes to mine those back out, when they could just be recycled, and they could be recovered at a much lower rate with a much smaller environmental impact. And most electronics waste is really not waste. It's intact electronics that could be recycled and reused. I always like to refer back to one of the key definition of recycle is reuse. And so many people go away from that and just go right to the trash and thinks there's no reuse value in there. I don't know how, I know you guys can read all these. I don't know if I need to go through every single bullet. I'll kind of stick to the highlights here, but one of the ones that I like is that it takes 530 pounds of fossil fuels and 48 pounds of chemicals and 1.5 tons of water just to make one computer and monitor. So if you think of any of those computers, monitors that could be reused, it just makes a huge environmental impact on just being sustainable. I mean, it just takes so much energy to make these new devices. E-waste frequently contains many hazardous materials, and predominantly, lead, mercury, and cadmium. All circuit boards, though they do contain precious metals, most of them do contain a high amount of lead. And mercury obviously is probably the worst evil here. They're a lot of the new circuit boards that are getting manufactured, obviously they're taking the mercury out, they're not using it in the manufacturing process. But a lot of the older circuit boards, especially like in automobiles, and some electronic devices have the old mercury switches, and they're just very toxic when they get put in the landfill. It doesn't take a whole lot of that mercury to contaminate groundwater. And unfortunately, we see a lot of it still going into the trash. Next, what happens if we fail to recycle electronics, and what's the impact? The impact is definitely human health and the environment. We impacting the soil from our landfills. A lot of landfills have liners and can somewhat contain some of those materials, but eventually it is going to leach out. It is going to get in the ground, and which will end up into our ground, into the groundwater well systems, aquifers, and just definitely negative for any of the water supplies, for irrigation, drinking, whatever. And obviously air pollution and rain pollution are another key factors here, to just improperly disposing or not recycling the electronics. Recycling electronics helps reduce pollution that we generated while manufacturing new products and need to extract valuable and limited virgin resources. Electronics recycling also reduces the energy used in new product manufacturing. Again, the big heavy hitters here, steel usually makes up 40 to 50% of all electronic waste, but then there's just really high amounts of the aluminum, coppers, brass, and then again the precious metals are definitely they're being used less and less. You see, like in the circuit boards, you're seeing a lot less gold and silver and palladium being used in the manufacturing of them, but they still need them just for the conductivity of it. But a lot of the older circuit boards you can find anywhere from, computers, any electronic device, especially, material made back in like the 80s and early 90s, with a really high content of gold and other precious metals in them that really definitely has a benefit if we can run those through and refine them and pull those precious metals out. Plastics is another huge one, ongoing problem that, globally, we really need a solution for this, and it's a tough one to tackle, and unfortunately, we just keep generating more and more of it. And then, of course, the rare earth elements, and then the water and energy it takes to produce the new products in manufacturing.
Matt, we have some questions. Should I read them to you now? Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. I feel like I'm kind of going through this a little quickly, so any questions would be great.
Okay, yeah, we'll take the first few questions here, so keep them coming if people have questions as Matt speaks. The first one is from Carrie. She said, my perception is that plug-in appliances that come into contact with food or water, like air fryers, coffee makers, are not accepted for recycling at e-events or Best Buy. Is that accurate? If so, can something be done other than send them to the landfill?
So I wouldn't want to speak for Best Buy and what they will and will not accept. From our perspective as Sadoff and then other electronics recyclers and larger recycling facilities, those would typically not be a problem. If there's a biohazard, like say there's medical equipment with any kind of blood or any other kind of material like that, that is what we cannot accept. But like say plug-in, like your air fryers, trying to think of some other, I guess you could even say like a curling iron, I guess, or something that could have, some kind of maybe fluids on it or something like that. We can actually accept those. Most of that type of material would run through our shredders, or at any other facility, they would go through their shredders. So they're typically, not being handled too much, or they get a quick sort and to see, what's going where. We want to make sure there's no batteries or any of the mercury containing material. But those would, in the end, they're going to end up in a shredder, and in that shredding process, the metals will get separated and pulled out. So I'm sure Best Buy is pretty strict on what they will and will not take. But as far as most electronics recyclers, those items are not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Haley. She says, Matt, I think when advocating for more responsible disposal methods, it would be important to communicate the money wasted by not recycling. Do you agree?
Yes.
Go ahead. She has more to say, but you can answer that.
Go ahead. Yeah,
okay, and then she said, money talks, and I found that a combination of communicating the economics and potential human health impacts is the most effective way to initiate change. There is a lot of legislative conversation going on right now around waste management, and I will communicate your points with those stakeholders.
So trying to figure out how to kind of catch that all at once. Mm-hmm. A lot of times recycling costs money, and there are definitely some commodities that have value. In the electronics world, we typically pay for computers and laptops and network equipment and stuff just for the scrap value. But a lot of the materials like the monitors, the CRTs, the LCDs, printers, batteries, they just cost money to recycle. And a lot of times when we're approaching say what we would call an industrial company, you know, your banks, your hospitals, you know, some large users of electronics equipment, you know, when you start quoting out costs of what it would actually take to properly recycle everything, they get a little sticker shock. And, you know, a lot of them want to back away, or they're looking for a cheaper way to do it and to get things recycled. And usually in the electronics recycling world, you know, cheaper means less certifications, and, you know, maybe more lax data destruction practices, and it makes it tough to try to pitch someone to someone that if you got a customer saying they can do it for zero, and we're going to charge, it does make it really tough. So we, you know, we do a lot of reporting to our customers that show, you know, like, you know, the emissions and you know, if you recycle X amount of pounds of this material, here's what your carbon footprint looks like. And we found that generating those type of reports and giving the customer more data on the environmental impact, it's easier for them to accept those charges.
Matt, do you find that this is a follow-up question for me. So do you think that these companies that approach you to recycle all of their old computer monitors, for example, they're just unaware of the cost, and they're unaware of the process that it takes, and therefore that's why the sticker shock is so
yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. I do believe that over the last, maybe especially 5 years, awareness has there's a lot more awareness, and people are starting to understand that it does cost money. There's more regulations being put out, and you know, there's a slide coming up about Nebraska and laws. You know, our corporate offices in Wisconsin, we're a program state, so there's actually laws in place that are enforced, where it is illegal to throw away, you know, any electronics, and there can be fines for that. So we found companies in those program states, they tend to take those charges quite easier, and they know that it's coming. And then it kind of comes down to working with companies, and I call it, they're always splitting pennies. You know, one company's going to charge 10 cents, another's going to do 9 cents, and that's kind of where maybe the competition comes in. I hope that kind of cover that, Allison.
Yeah, I think that was a good response to start off with, and we can keep talking about it if people have follow-up questions with regard to that. So if you're welcome to continue, those are the two questions that came up right off the bat.
I guess I will follow up on that. You know, you don't hear a lot about it publicly, and it's kind of hard to chase down, but the SEC is now in November coming out where they're gonna kind of manage and control financial institutions and their e-waste. And so there's going to be, you know, mandates on how they're getting rid of their electronics, how they're getting recycled, you know, with a big emphasis on data destruction and data security. But that we think that that's going to make a pretty large impact on awareness once they step in, and you know, these larger companies are going to see that they're going to have to, you know, get on board, and you know, it's probably going to cost more money. They need to increase their budgets. But I don't. We're hoping to see some big changes next year in the landscape with companies and how they handle their recycling.
So that policy goes into effect next month, is that
correct? Yep.
Okay.
So if I'll keep going on here. So do businesses have to recycle e-waste in Nebraska? And you know, currently Nebraska state law requires them to properly dispose of any waste, though households are not required. And you know, if you know, I live in Lincoln, you can still drive down the street on a Sunday night, you know, before garbage day, and every once in a while you'll still see that TV sitting out on the curb, and the garbage men still take it, and drives me a little crazy, but you know, that's still, you know, when it comes to the consumer and household material, they can still throw it away. And but the Department of Environmental and Energy, they do encourage it. And you know, we've seen a little bit of a push from them, not a whole lot, but you know, they are at least attempting to promote residential recycling. And we move to how do you recycle your waste in Nebraska? And should I put electronics in my recycling bin? And you know, I do believe there are a few companies that actually you know, have bins for electronics. But typically you would not want to do that, especially if there's any data. And you know, data it's just a huge topic in the electronics recycling industry right now. You know, they always say, you know, it only takes one hard drive or one data bearing device to bury a company in millions of dollars of lawsuits or litigation. So, you know, just throwing a device that might potentially have data in the recycling bin, you know, unless you have no worries, is definitely, you know, might not be the right route to go. But the most secure way is to use a reputable and certified recycler. And there's quite a few certifications out there. You know, R2 is one of the biggest ones, eStewards. You know, there's quite a large network of companies that are certified to work with. In Nebraska, the list is a little small, but there's still quite a few out there. Another way for, say, the you know, the consumer electronics is to look for the recycling drives in your area. You know, a lot of times they're, you know, definitely on social media. And then of course, the Nebraska Recycling Council is a great resource to identify, you know, recyclers in the area or upcoming events. And they'll always be happy to help you on finding out how to properly recycle your materials. And then kind of going back to the businesses, you know, yes, the businesses in Nebraska are required to dispose of all e-waste. Again, working with a certified, reputable e-recycler is definitely the way to go. And you know, again, it all goes back to data. You know, this data security is so important. You know, back in early 2000s, when I started my little company, we you know, you could call about any company and they would give you your electronics, no questions asked. And that has definitely changed over the years. But definitely on the business side, it should be the first priority is to keep your data secure. Again, benefits of working with a certified recycler. There's you know, security, protection, liability, and environmental. You know, you should definitely, you know, anyone you work with should be able to give you, you know, all their certifications, potentially even their downstreams on where the material is going to after they process it. You know, ISO certifications are always a big benefit, and you know, eStore, like I said, R2 and eStores are kind of the big ones in the U.S. R2 is geared a little bit more towards the processes of resale, and eStores is more geared to you know, keeping as much material domestic as possible. There are a couple of companies out there that actually have both certifications, which is quite a huge benefit. So for Nebraska, you know, qualified Nebraska recyclers, you know, again, working with a certified recycle, R2 and eSteward, you know, so in the Lincoln and Omaha area, you know, we have us, a Sadoff e-recycling data destruction, and another great company we do a lot of work with in the Nebraska Recycling Council is very familiar with is American Recycling, and they are in Lincoln. You know, I would say that they probably have an easier reach out in western Nebraska. If for any of you out there, they probably have a few more trucks running out that direction than we do. there are also some other non-certified recyclers in Nebraska that we have worked with, others have worked with, and though they might not have the big R2 and E-Storage certifications, just because they do not have those certifications doesn't mean they're doing things properly. And ones that we've kind of identified over the years is Cross Electronics Recycling in Omaha. They're a great resource. They do a lot of charitable work, and they just they have a good employment program, helping people with jobs. They do a great job. Element Recycling is up in Omaha, and another two is Lifespan and Midwest Electronics Recycling. Sorry. So, Allison, is there any more questions? Again, I feel like I'm kind of pushing through this fast, but
you mentioned this a little bit, but I know you attended the eScrap conference recently, Matt, and you said that data is a hot topic in your industry right now. What are other hot topics or discussion topics that came up in that conference? We'd love to hear kind of the big picture topics that are going around right now.
Well, I would say one of the biggest ones is probably plastics. I mean, the number could jump or around depending on the device, but I mean, you're looking at most electronics are an easy 30% plus plastics, and plastics are just very, very hard to deal with. There's not a lot of companies around the country that are, I would say, properly recycling them. Most of the plastics, especially material that comes off shredders, they are going into landfill currently. And in most states, it is still legal, and there are some definitely better ways to do it than others. But the big goal is obviously to keep those plastics out of the landfill. So I'd say that was probably the hottest topic there. Obviously, the next one is the markets and what the precious metal markets are going to do over the next year. And without going into the politics of it all, it's I think everyone's a little uncertain of what's going to happen over the next year with the precious metal markets and just life globally and what's going to happen and how it'll affect the recycling industry.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I always like hearing kind of the big picture topics that are going on, at those national conferences like the one you attended. You also mentioned, or maybe I mentioned in my introduction as well, that you started in this industry in 2002. How has the electronics recycling industry changed since you started more than 20 years ago, Matt?
Well, I think, as I mentioned before, I started a little company and started in my garage, and we kind of grew it from there. But back in the early 2000s, I remember my first company was one of the largest hospitals in Nebraska. And I literally called them up and I just said, hey, we do electronics recycling, we do it for free. And they said, come get it. And they probably had about 2 semis worth, which did not fit in my garage. Back in those days, I'll have to say I started at a great time. Getting customers was easy, but there was, definitely no regulations. Nobody was asking for paperwork. Data wasn't even, it rarely got brought up. There was no data concerns, and so I would say definitely looking back from those days, there's a lot more electronics recyclers around now. There's definitely more competition, but there's a lot more awareness as well, which is definitely a positive thing. People are looking at, who is this company we're going to use? Why are we looking at them? What are the benefits? What kind of certifications do they have, and how are they treating our data? Is definitely the biggest one.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the experience. I find people who have been in an industry for a long time, more than a year or two, just have an insight that is interesting for people to hear about. So on one other question, you mentioned hazardous materials are in e-waste. Can you explain how materials like that are handled? What considerations are made when items with hazardous materials in them are recycled? What kinds of things need to be considered to make sure that the workers are safe and for those materials to be handled safely for the environment?
So I'd say there's a couple materials that come in that are definitely hazardous. Mercury, as we kind of touched on before, the mercury bearing devices, which is surprising how many circuit boards have mercury switches in them, and also radioactive material, which is definitely found in electronic scrap, though it's not quite as common. But for the larger scrap yards that are handling electronics waste and metals, most of them have the radiation detectors when the semis are pulling through, and they're a pretty good indication of if there's any hazardous material in there. When that kind of material comes in, we would reject the load. When it's the smaller electronics like the mercury bearing switches, we definitely separate all that material out, and then those would go to an approved downstream that can handle that type of material. Unfortunately, most circuit boards or any circuit board that gets recycled is going to end up getting shredded at some point in the downstream process. And if those mercury switches are in there, just one of those can contaminate, a whole load. Another, I don't know if we call it quite hazardous, but very dangerous material. And another huge topic, which I could have went back to the e-scrap conference, is batteries. Batteries are necessary evil. There's so many of them out there, and they're just the lithium ion batteries in particular. They're just a huge fire hazard. It's just unbelievable. We've had them at our facilities before where material comes in and it's commingled, or people have a laptop in a box, and at the bottom of a box, and then they throw a big TV on it. It smashes that battery, and they can start on fire. After seeing some of those small fires, to put it in perspective, if you have a cell phone battery, very small. A lot of times we'll see those, they'll fall out of the bottom of a box or something, and a forklift will run them over, or they're super thin, and it looks like a little candle. They'll actually sit there and burn, and they can burn for hours. So you can kind of get an idea of how, surprising you don't hear more fires from lithium ion batteries. So there are plenty of them out there. So those are, the battery handling, I would say, is a hot topic. On how people are accepting them, what we expect our customers to, how to package them to bring them in, just to reduce any risk of serious injury or loss of property. It just it doesn't take a lot to burn a place down. There's been, I think, about 6 e-scrap facilities this year to date have literally burnt to the ground over lithium ion fires, battery fires.
This year, you said?
This year, yep.
Okay.
A couple,
wow.
2 really, really big ones. Yeah.
Okay, wow. We have more questions from our attendees. Haley asked, she said, slightly off topic, but have you heard of the right to repair laws? California just passed one. Hopefully it would reduce e-waste if consumers could fix their own devices.
So yes, we definitely are aware of that and have looked into it a little bit. It doesn't affect us so much out in Nebraska, but it's a huge issue. I mean, if you think about a company is restricting who can work on devices, you're pretty much putting material out there that has a one-use life. It's going to get used one time, and especially if we're going to pick on Apple, and your iPhone costs $1,000. And now the screen breaks or something like that, and unless you take it into a very high-priced, authorized Apple dealer, you can't go to the mall guy anymore and spend $50 to get your screen fixed. It could potentially be a one-use item. It could get used one time, get tossed in the trash, or even if it was recycled, the device could have been fixed and at a much lower cost than the energy it takes to build a new one. So it'll be interesting to see, where it ends up. But Apple, we and other companies do a lot of resale of material, laptops, parts, pieces. We're trying to, pull the last use out of it. In Nebraska, we really just do not see a lot of the Apple products. A lot of companies aren't using them just because of the high cost. So currently for us right now, when we're receiving Apple products, I would say 90% of it is damaged beyond repair and at the end of life. So it's not really affecting us so much, but there are definitely e-scrap, or they call it ITAD companies out there that's kind of their bread and butter is repairing those types of devices. So
okay. Some more questions have come in. Karina asked, how much time does it take to reclaim the precious metals from a smartphone?
Well, that is a good question. So most smartphones, and in the last year, we have found a process that we can shred those with the battery in them, which is huge. Before, I think it maybe not 14 months, but the phones had to be dismantled to take the battery out before it could get shredded. So that was, definitely a lengthy process. But currently, right now, we'll get, thousands or, pallet boxes or barrels. They usually come in with cell phones. We'll have the guys kind of sort through them. They pick out ones that might be reusable, but the scrap ones will literally go into a shredder, and then they get melted from there. And that's how the precious metals get recovered. So from a financial standpoint, it takes about 4 months. From an actual labor standpoint, there's probably about maybe an hour into it, if that answers it correctly.
Okay. Sorry if you heard my clock chiming just there. Another question Karina asked, do you think banning households from throwing e-waste in the landfill would be successful? And could it help steer better consumption behaviors?
So I would say absolutely yes. And that would go back to the kind of the program state where so our corporate office is in Wisconsin, and the NRD up there has, they kind of govern the electronics waste. And so Wisconsin's called a program state. And that means that there are laws in place where businesses and consumers, residential end users, you cannot throw material away. So in Wisconsin, you can literally get a ticket for throwing a keyboard in your garbage can. That probably doesn't happen too often. What we see is the garbage men will leave it at your door, and they do not accept it. So definitely huge. It makes just a huge difference on how much is actually getting recycled. The flip side of that we've seen in Wisconsin is a lot of that consumer products they're using, they have costs associated with recycling them, your keyboards, your TVs, your monitors. So as we've done, like the electronics recycling events in Wisconsin, if we get them subsidized or there's a grant to help offset those costs, it's kind of like Nebraska to come out of the woodwork, and everyone's bringing the material because they do not want to pay for it. But I'd love to see something like that happen in Nebraska. I think it'd make a huge difference, especially in the metro areas. I know we're a long ways from there, but I definitely think it would make a huge impact on the amount of material that's getting properly recycled.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I think we have a lull in the questions for a moment, and I know you have some cool photos and videos to show us before we're done in 20 minutes. So if you want to continue, that would be great, I think.
Yeah, so we do have a partner company we work with, which is called URT. It's Universal Recycling Technologies. They're in Wisconsin, Texas, and Oregon. And we, I would call them a partner. We do a lot of business back and forth, but they are an end-of-life TV and LCD monitor demanufacturer. And we have recently switched to them over the last 2 years. And I know Allison had mentioned there was some questions. One of the biggest questions she gets asked is, why does it cost so much to recycle a TV? I guess the answer is there's the process for actually demanufacturing a CRTV is huge. There's a lot of work, a lot of equipment, a lot of time that gets put into it, especially to do it properly. So URT has some shredders that they utilize and have built and designed that separate the plastics, and it doesn't just separate the plastics into one type. It actually goes into about 6 different types of plastics. And I apologize, I don't know all the different terms for them all, but there's a lot of different ones in the electronic scrap. And they can also sort out the glass. And they are, pretty much a TV would go into their facility and comes out as dust. I do have a couple pictures here. Their processes are quite a bit proprietary, so they did have a couple here though. If I can get them up here. Allison, is that popping up there?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So like I said, I wish I could get some pictures of their whole process. It's about 100 to 120,000 square foot facility, or the footprint that it takes to demanufacture the TVs and LCDs. So this is all plastics right here, and this is probably about 3 to 4 days worth of running CRT TVs. In this picture, there's actually about 4 or 5 rows over this long. So they have come up with a process where they can, separate all the plastics. And right now, they're currently at a 70 to 80% recycle rate, where it's actually getting made into new products. And in the next 6 months, they're on track to be at the more 95 to 100% domestic solution for plastic. So they're kind of out in front of everyone, definitely the leader in plastics. Just a couple small pictures here of this is like their demanufacturing line. We said we couldn't get the whole thing, but there's it's not one person in the corner of a room. There's a huge facility with a huge demanufacturing line, taking them apart. Here's another one where you can kind of see the process where these are all LCD TVs, kind of larger ones, probably like your 40-inch and up. And this is kind of at the stage where they've taken off all the plastics they can, and now they're left with the bare screen and the frame. And then this material will go up this conveyor belt and then goes through the big shredding process. The whole belt system, if I remember correctly, it was almost 2 miles long for all the processes it goes through. So they'll go through, they have what they call a sink float system, where material is shredded into different sizes, then it'll go through these water tables, and the plastics, will float, the heavy metal sink, and they can kind of separate it all out through there. And let's see. So here, kind of an interesting picture of, this is the 2 types of glass that come out of the CRT recycling process. So they have a coarse grade right here, you can see on the left, and then a fine grade on the right. And then in the middle there is the tile that is made out of the glass. So URT has done a great job with finding a partner in Brazil that they ship the glass to. They make tiles there, and then ship them throughout the world, primarily back to the US. This picture here is just a custom tile that their downstream in Brazil had made for them. So they can do anything with the glass to make all these tiles. So just neat fact to see what happens to the glass. And it definitely not going to a landfill, or some other companies, they use maybe liners in a landfill where they can put the glass. So they've just come up with a system that definitely goes to end of life on recycling. And then I don't know what the interest would be, but I did have probably 2 short videos I could share of just like their dismantling line.
Yeah, I think that would be great, Matt.
Oops. Sorry. Well, I'm getting there, sorry. So it's just like their demanufacturing line. So, you know, this is an old CRT, you know, monitor from our computer. And, you know, you can see it's not definitely definitely not clean work. There's a lot that goes into it. But this is kind of how it all starts. You know, it'll come in, they're stripping it down, they're taking off all the plastics they can, they're, you know, removing the circuit board. There's a decent amount of copper wire in these units that'll come out to get recycled. And this is kind of how it all ends. So when it finishes from this process, you know, it's moving down the line, and then we'll go up into the shredder to get shredded and then sort out all the metals left over in the glass. And then, like I said, one more, I think it's a kind of a quick one here. Well, for some reason, I apologize, that one's not popping up, but
That's okay.
oh, here's another one too. This is kind of interesting. I'll restart that. This is at the end of the line of their glass process. So this is all the glass coming off the line, and there's someone there just cleaning up any little bits and pieces of material that might have been missed. And then this again will go run through a magnetic sorter to make sure there's no metallics left in it. But I guess the whole point of it was just to show that it's the CRT, LCD, as well as any kind of electronics manufacturing. It's a huge process. To properly do it, it takes large facilities, lots of equipment, and there's just a lot of costs involved.
Matt, I think it helps to see what happens, the process for CRT TVs, what happens to them when you drop them off at a collection event like we've had with you in the past. So thank you for sharing those photos and clips with us today.
And I guess another interesting fact or some more numbers is, over the last specifically 5 years, probably, there's been a huge decline in the amount of CRT glass that's getting recycled annually. And that's, because it's slowly going away. I mean, there's still plenty of barns and, sheds and hordes of CRTs out there. But the amount of material by volume is starting to shrink, and they're starting to see an impact of that. So the next CRT, we call it, are going to be solar panels. So it'll be interesting over the next couple of years to see how, as the CRT volume starts to decline, now we're going to start seeing these solar panels that were, they've been out for 10 to 15 years, are now at their end of life. It's like I said, we call it the new CRT. And again, the same process here for the CRTs and LCD demanufacturing. URT has come up with a process to tweak the machines they can actually run those panels currently. There's not a lot of value in it, and it's probably going to be a charge type of item, but they have found a way to recycle a very large amount. According to the current process now, where probably 80% of it is getting landfilled. So it'd be interesting to see over the next couple of years how that process develops and awareness on the solar panels.
So do you guys accept solar panels currently at Sadoff?
Correct. Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Haley Noldy said, thanks for all the work you do. It's always interesting to see the behind the scenes. So I'm glad that we were able to share, you were able to share those photos and videos today. And then Karina has asked how many employees are at Sadoff and Lincoln and nationwide?
So nationally, we have about 260 employees. Our Lincoln facility, I believe they're probably about 25 employees. And our La Vista facility has about 13. So we have 5 facilities in Wisconsin, and Fond du Lac, Wisconsin is our corporate office. And that is a 40-acre facility that has what we call a mega shredder. So that's the shredder that you can put the school buses in and shreds it all up. So that's kind of our main. There's probably about 100 employees at that facility. So that's definitely our largest.
Okay. It's up to you, Matt, if you'd like to finish with your final slides. That we don't have any other questions
Sure.
in the box right now.
Well, this slide's been up for a while, so you may or may not have a chance to read it, so I can just kind of skim through it. I'll be going over some myths and facts. But first one we do hear all the time is that e-waste eventually ends up in landfills, and that is definitely not true. The certified recyclers and even non-certified recyclers, they're keeping primarily keeping all those metals and everything out of the landfills. And there's tons of processes we use, especially like at our shredding facilities. We're trying to be at like a 5% waste, and just to keep all the harmful materials out of the landfill. So another quick fact: we actually in Wisconsin we own a landfill. It's on some of our property, and we've been using it since the 50s. And with the technology and how it's the refining process, the recycling process, the shredding processes have all improved. Back then we could only pull out whatever percentage it was. Well, now that's greatly increased to how much metals we can pull out. So we're actually at a point where we're going to move that facility, reline it, and rerun that through. And they estimate that they'll pull $20 million out of metals out of that. So just kind of a little interesting fact about how it's evolved over the years with the shredding processes. Number 2, only large electronics are worth recycling. That is another myth, as usually the smaller devices, say your cell phones, usually the smaller it is, the more value it actually has for precious metals. Also that a lot of the smaller devices have more toxic metals in them as well. Another one is that the local e-waste recycling departments will handle it. Definitely a myth that the electronic devices and computer hardware in the trash, always go to a recycling center. And this is definitely not the case, as most municipalities, cities, towns, they can't afford an electronics recycling center, something that's subsidized or funded by a city or government. So definitely another benefit of going to looking for the certified recyclers. Another one is that e-trash recycling is associated with data theft risk. And this is definitely a misconception that is ironic when it's computer hardware recycling through a responsible and experienced waste recycler mitigates, almost all risk of data theft and loss. And then the last one is that e-waste gets shipped overseas anyway, and a lot of that is true on that. A lot of e-waste does get shipped overseas to less regulated countries to get processed. But this only happens if one hands over, your IT assets and to a and certified recycler, irresponsible e-waste recycling company. So I would like to add that in the end, a lot of the, aluminums, what we call like the dirty coppers that are blended with other materials, a lot of material does still go overseas for like refining, and almost all circuit boards. All the refiners that actually melt them down and pull out the precious metals are still overseas. Though next year there might be two local ones opening up, which will be maybe a game changer and interesting to see how they work and if they can actually pull out the value that they can overseas for the circuit boards. And well, I just went through all that. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And I just did it.
Oh, there it is.
There we go. In closing, in the just a couple of resources, places to drop off for Omaha and Lincoln. Other companies. Again, American Recycling in Lincoln is a great resource. Everyone on this list is definitely partners of ours that we work closely with. And obviously contact the Nebraska Recycling Council for any questions as well, and definitely looking for upcoming events.
Thank you, Matt. I think what you shared is really welcome information for both new people to the industry, our staff, everyone. I'm sure learned something from you today with your experience, and so I just want to thank you for speaking with us today. I'm going to come back on the screen here just for the last few moments. So I just want to thank you. If there's anyone who would want to partner with Sadoff for, let's say, an electronics collection event, is it best to contact you? Is it best to contact a main number with Sadoff if they want to have an event in the next year or so? How do they do that?
Yeah, feel free to you can contact me directly or the main office. It doesn't matter. Either way would get you taken care of.
Okay, very good. We are near our end of our hour. I want to respect everyone's time. I just want to mention one thing that we have been working on as an office, mainly our executive director, Haley Nolde, has been working with State Senator Hughes. She has introduced LR 163. So I just want to mention this because it's important for our industry here in Nebraska. State Senator Hughes has introduced LR 163, which is an interim study to examine opportunities to increase recycling of municipal solid waste. That's its official title. Haley has been working with her office to compile data from recycling professionals in our state using a survey. And if you haven't taken that survey, I am going to include it in the chat box so that if you'd like to provide feedback regarding recycling of municipal solid waste, please feel free to. I'm going to see if the link didn't work, so I'm going to have to open it up here. Here we go. So I just want to make sure to take this opportunity to share the survey link. If you want to provide feedback, this feedback will be shared with State Senator Hughes' office as they make decisions moving forward regarding recycling in Nebraska. So thank you all for coming today. We appreciate your time and your questions. And again, we thank Matt for presenting today about electronics recycling. I wish you a wonderful afternoon. Thanks again. Bye.